the News Channel 5 network, this is MorningLine with Nick Barris.
Good morning, everyone. Thanks for joining us on Morning Line. Nick Barris coming to you on this Wednesday. A good show on tap for you, and I'll invite you to join us as always, either on the Plus, you're watching on TV right now, News Channel 5 Plus. Certainly hope you have power right now. I know several homes do not still in the Middle Tennessee area. And we're also, as always, streaming live on Facebook at newschannel5.com. You go to the News Channel 5 page on Facebook, and you can message us any questions or comments. Good morning to all of you out there on Facebook. Good morning to you on the Plus. This morning we're going to talk about some of the legal issues with regard to COVID-19. The question as to whether or not perhaps you or a loved one gets sick from the virus, and depending on the circumstances, do you have some type of legal action, perhaps some type of malpractice, or perhaps some issue that happened maybe within an assisted living facility or a nursing home. And we've certainly seen that there likely will be lawsuits filed at several of these facilities where there have been questions about whether or not the proper steps were taken. And we know about what's happened at that facility in Gallatin, those coming along. And to talk about this, to take your questions and give us an overview of some of the legal issues with regard to COVID-19, of course, is our regular guest, comes on every month, Clint Kelly, malpractice attorney. Good morning to you, sir. Can you hear me loud and clear?
I can hear you just fine, Nick.
Excellent. So you were telling me you're at your office right now there in Hendersonville, but you're one of the many right now who still, you do not have power from these storms this weekend.
Well, no, actually, Nick, I'm at the house.
Oh, you're at the house. It's the other way around.
Yeah.
Okay.
Right. It's the other way around. But no, I have no power here. Fortunately, I've got an iPad that stays charged up, and I have good wireless connection through Verizon, so I can do this with you today.
Oh,
but
wow.
I've been without power since Sunday night.
I'm sorry. A lot of people going through a tough time. Hope that gets up, though. We heard it may be a week for some or more. Well, Clint, let's get right to this. I want to hit some of the newest things that have happened with regard to some of the lawsuits that we expect to be filed. We'll get into more of that in a moment. But, well, first, let's clarify. You do represent some individuals from that Gallatin facility, correct? And no lawsuit filed yet, but you've written those letters of notice?
Correct. We represent 13 residents and the families of those residents, and we represent 7 employees of the facility, all of whom were infected with COVID-19. We've sent pre-suit notice for one of the families. That's the Bolton case. And as your viewers know, we have to wait 60 days before we can file the complaint, because by law there's a 60-day waiting period that we have to abide by. Then once that period's passed, we can then file the lawsuit. And we expect the rest of the pre-suit notices for the balance of our clients will be submitted probably by the end of this week. And then we will try to file all the lawsuits as a group.
All right, Clint, and let's clarify this when it comes to malpractice cases, as you always do whenever you come on the show. Standard of care is the issue here. I mean, there can, would you agree, be instances, be it at an assisted living facility, a hospital, or someplace else, where everyone perhaps does everything they're expected to do correctly, and yet somehow, some way, someone still gets infected. And if that's the case, then you say, hey, they did what they can and it still happened. The key for when you feel you have a case is if there's been some form of negligence or they didn't live up to standard of care?
Sure. Nick, we've retained an infectious disease specialist who's going to help us with the Gallatin nursing home cases. And this is what he's telling us. You have to look at the COVID-19 as like a burglar who tries to get into the house. And there are a lot of different ways you can get into the house, but if you keep the doors locked and the windows shut, more often than not, the burglar will not get into the house. And if you look at the nursing home conduct in this case, they left the doors open, they left the windows open, and they basically sat around and waited for the burglar to come into the house. That's the bottom line here. That's why we took these cases, because their reckless indifference to protecting their own residents is what led to the massive outbreak. And I don't know, did you see the numbers, Nick, that the state reported that, of course, they've stopped doing this now, but a couple of weeks ago, they had 165 confirmed cases at that nursing home. Did you see that?
Yep. I mean, yeah, the numbers are fairly stunning. Scary is what they are.
It was 5 times 5 times more than the next nursing home. So you have to look at the situation, ask yourself, it's one thing if you have a few infections like a campfire, but at this institution where there's a forest fire of cases, then it tells you, and this is what we're being told by an infectious disease specialist, there was likely more than one source for the infection. In addition to the failure to prevent the infection, there was a failure to mitigate inside the premises. Because once you get someone infected, you can isolate them, segregate them, and try to prevent further infection and exposures. That wasn't done here in this case. They blew it on the mitigation, and that's why this outbreak became massive.
Interesting. Either, negligence or in a situation where maybe they just didn't think it was that big a deal. And we see some of this playing out, by the way, Clint, right now, not to make the comparison between the two, but in some of the prisons and jails as well. But I know for a fact, my folks, as you know, are in an assisted living facility outside this state here. And as soon as this started happening, that facility locked everything down, okay? Literally locked down. No one in and out except essential folks, and they have not had a single case there.
What does that tell you?
Exactly makes your point, all right? And see the places where a bunch of cases show up, you wonder. And again, things can happen, but you think you're going to be able to make the case that they didn't respond the way they should have. At the very least, if there was a case, they should have attacked it right then and there, and you don't think they did the right thing when it started.
Yeah, in your parents' nursing home or assisted living facility, they kept the doors locked, the windows shut, the burglars stayed out. In Gallatin, they left the doors and windows open. The burglars came in, went out, came in, went out, came in again. I mean, that's just inexcusable when you know it's coming, and they did know it's coming, and failed to exercise proper precautionary measures to protect their residents. I mean, the families, they're devastated, Nick. They're also irate, by the way, and they just want some serious answers, and they're going to get them.
Clint, a part of this right now, and I'm looking at some of the numbers across the country, and they may be more than this now, there are some 12,000 individuals that have died in nursing homes across the country is what they're saying. There are some 15,000 nursing homes or more nationwide. Assisted living, I don't know, some of those lines blur. But now we've seen that in several states, and maybe even looking at the national level, the industry asking lawmakers to pass legislation that protects them from lawsuits. And their argument is, look, this is a pandemic like nothing we've ever seen before. How can we be held responsible for folks being sick? And some states have actually passed some protections. I don't believe it's happened here in Tennessee, but it's probably going to be brought up.
Right. I read a New York law that was passed that was very specific. Their situation was different than what we have here. What we had here was something manageable. It's still manageable. In fact, it's so manageable that the social distancing standards, the lockdown, if you will, has been loosened considerably by our governor. So we had opportunities here in Tennessee to get ahead of this and protect the residents. And in most institutions, that was done, Nick. In most of the nursing homes, and there are a bunch of them here in Tennessee, the residents were taken care of and protected. This one place, though, Gallatin Nursing Home, that was not done. And the move for immunity is troublesome for a number of different reasons, but primarily it's you're going to let wrongdoers off the hook if you pass blanket immunity, because what it says is it doesn't really matter what type of safety protocols you have in place or whether you follow them. If there's an infection caused by COVID-19 during an emergency pandemic, then there is immunity. You can't sue even if the nursing home acted negligently and caused your family member's death. That's not going to go over well with the families of the residents who died at the nursing home or the employees who want answers and deserve to get compensation for reckless misconduct. So, this is going to be a long fight, I think, over the immunity. I don't hear the public clamoring or beating their pans outside their doors to give immunity to corporations who wrongfully failed to protect citizens or their customers. And I certainly don't hear that for people clamoring for immunity for nursing homes when they recklessly expose residents who ultimately die from infection.
You know, Clint, this immunity that we're talking about and what we've seen in some states not only applies to those assisted living facilities and nursing homes, but also possibly healthcare providers, hospitals, I mean, extending to that as well. Is some of the same thing going on there where perhaps in some of these medical facilities, proper standard of care is not being taken?
Yeah, I don't know enough about what's going on in the hospitals to comment on whether they're doing well or not. I have a different attitude about protecting emergency personnel who are providing emergency care in a situation where, there may be an argument that the care wasn't proper. I can see where you might want to give some protection to those folks. I don't believe you give protection to a corporation like a hospital, because I believe that they're required to follow safety protocols. The thing to remember, everyone had notice of this, at least here in Tennessee. And I'm just speaking now about Tennessee. We all had notice of this. We knew it was coming. We had time to prepare. And so if some company or some entity failed to prepare and exposed patients or customers to the virus when they shouldn't have been exposed, and then failed to mitigate it, I think they should be held accountable. And you know what, Nick? If they did everything right, a jury's going to find for them, or judge will throw out the lawsuit. These are hard cases to win anyway, so it's not like just because you can sue, that means you're going to recover money. So I want everybody to keep in mind, 80% of these lawsuits are won by doctors and hospitals. They're very tough to win. So it's going to be a very exceptional case to be able to prevail in court, and which means there are going to be some really bad circumstances, bad care that would warrant a plaintiff's verdict.
All right, listen, we have to take a break, but I'm hearing from folks as well saying the idea of blanket immunity, I mean, in something like this, to me, is not in anyone's interest except the facility that seeks it, I suppose. Sure. Simply for the point you're saying is, look, it's not like not giving immunity means they're all going down. If a facility does everything right and somehow it still gets in, I'm on the jury. I'm going to say, look, they did what they can, and we know things sometimes just happen. But if it can be exposed, as you say, you're going to get information on that they were negligent, well, they need to be held accountable. And anyone who doesn't think so on that, sure. I mean, gosh, what if it's your loved one in there? Think about it. What if it's you someday? Listen, we'll take a break. When we come back, we've got phone calls too. By the way, we can talk about this COVID and the issues here, but Clint is terrific in answering any questions you may have about malpractice, a potential case. And keep in mind, I want to throw this out, Clint, as we go to the break, and he always does. There's a 1-year statute of limitations, folks. So if you have something that you want to ask him, do it now, get it on the table, because after a year, you may have been wronged. After that year, there's nothing you can do. So we'll take a break. We'll take your calls and comments on Facebook right after this.